experience that customers within the services buying segments have achieved to date as a baseline, and continue to measure achievement of the expected customer experience in future engagements to help with the standardization efforts. So think about ways to foster relationships with your customers before, during, and after service delivery to help identify the experience. Securing the definition of this component will help to increase the applicability and the repeatability for the service. The second consideration is having a detailed description of your service. The service's detailed description outlines the expected customer experience and leverages the findings from the commercial research consideration, such as business needs, buyer personas, and any competitive factors. The detailed description should convey the service's required elements in business language from the buyer's perspective and describe the core requirements, expected deliverables, expected outcomes, and performance metrics by phases or stages of the project so that clients clearly understand the methods by which they will consume the service. Now, note that core requirements can be a combination of how the service attends to the needs and experience of the customer, measurable criteria that helps make the service tangible, and any applicable standards or certifications that support service delivery, which could be HIPAA privacy requirements for healthcare services and ISO, COBIT, or ITIL standards for IT service management. The work that you do to capture the service's detailed description will ensure that you focus on the quality of the service as opposed to just the quantity of services that may be required to ultimately deliver what a customer needs. One component of this consideration is expected deliverables. Organizations should describe each expected deliverable across 4 key areas: output, activity, frequency, and metrics. This framework can help answer questions about every single deliverable, such as what tangible outputs are delivered to a client and how frequently are they updated? Can these outputs be templatized? And how measurable is the quality of the output? Following this framework will allow you to systematically monitor and improve each deliverable while contributing to further alignment with a common customer experience and growing the service's level of productization. While key deliverables such as assessments, data mapping, and software or process implementations are typical areas of focus, they may also include interim outputs such as specification reviews, design review results, preliminary findings, test scripts, and test result reviews. In addition, organizations can understand the alignment of the service delivery to expected outcomes. In other words, the impact the service has on customers as some unit of measure, such as increased revenue or cost improvements. Make sure that metrics such as assessment data and benchmarks are specific, measurable, and time-bounded, and that they define the conclusion of the delivery project. The third consideration is competency alignment. The resources used to drive and deliver a productized service must align to your organization's core competencies. So roles and responsibilities for the service should be clearly outlined, and the resources within those roles should leverage the repeatable aspects of service delivery in order to maximize the experience that they bring to the table. When the demand is high for a service, having vetted resource pools and an understanding of how many resources to secure for a project is important in order to minimize the time between deal closure and project kickoff. Now, one component of competency alignment is the strong technical communication and relationship skills of resources. Talented senior technical staff is required to drive productized services. These resources are the brain trust that validate technical architectures and delivery strategies while maintaining a solid connection to your customer stakeholders and ensuring that the client's experience is as expected. Soft skill sets such as language, geographic alignment, management abilities, and even communication style are just as important as the deep technical skills themselves. The stronger those combined skill sets are, the more differentiated an organization's service offerings will become from the competition. One example that we see here in the market is a company called Bench Accounting. They're a fintech company, and what they do is they provide productized services to automate bookkeeping and financial capabilities for small business owners. The level of service is based on a range of average monthly expenses, and they also provide add-on government and reporting packages. The tagline that they have really speaks to how they deliver their services. And I quote, "We take care of bookkeeping for small business owners, and we do it in a way that's never been done before by pairing intuitive software with real human bookkeepers." What Bench does is they pair their clients with expert bookkeepers. And while their mundane tasks that are related to keeping track of expenses, categorizing those expenses, identifying anomalies, and so on, are actually addressed using software and consistent processes. Bench's experts focus on maintaining good relationships with their customers and offering situational advice that's based on their own expertise. And in this way, Bench can scale their services and have a way to consistently improve that customer experience. The final consideration in this framework is consistent delivery. Services that follow a SAP approach are delivered in a streamlined manner and create a consistent, measurable experience across all target customer segments. Now, while there are still opportunities to provide specialized implementation options to a customer, ideally most of an offering's delivery becomes standardized. Organizations can achieve this standardization with a precise service delivery methodology, having a blueprint for managing resource capacity, ensuring high quality deliverables, and tracking phase or stage-based performance indicators in order to continually assess and improve that level of productization. Consistent delivery also provides a solid level of confidence to the consumer of the service in order for them to know that they're not the only ones. They're not the guinea pigs. One component of consistent delivery is the delivery methodology. The delivery methodology defines the practices, procedures, and rules or working methods used to deliver a service, regardless of whether an implementation is fully standardized or contains some specialization. Organizations can streamline delivery by identifying manual or unconventional practices that are currently part of the delivery process, and then systematically productizing those practices, such as with software tools, fixed configurations, and scripts to achieve consistency and scale. As an example, let's take a look at the assessment phase of a managed hosting platform migration service as an example. As part of this phase, you may need to conduct interviews with key stakeholders in order to understand the current state of on-premise usage and integrations. Now, early in the service's history, this may involve ad hoc questions whose answers are captured in free-form text. In order to streamline this part of the delivery, you can consider analyzing past questions and answers to reveal more standard questions which contain a finite set of answers that are ultimately selectable. And this method can be used directly by the interviewers, or you may choose to use a software tool that can deliver these questions and capture the answers. By productizing the assessment, you'll be able to better understand, or I should say better measure the responses across customers and evolve the service offering accordingly. It's always good to include follow-up phases as well that regularly measure the experience in order to iteratively improve upon those practices. So as you can see, each of these four considerations contain key components that differentiate a SAP-based service from both a product and an ad hoc service. A SAP approach helps companies increase the certainty and scalability of a service for a collection of customers with that common customer experience. So how can you get started with SAP? Well, first, Share these considerations across your organization and discuss the specific goals that your organization will want to achieve. Use the questionnaire that we talked about earlier to assess and prioritize the appropriateness of a SAP approach for your services. Identify those services in your portfolio that are doing well so that you can zone in on which components of the service are doing better than others. And in this way, they can be cataloged and used as a benchmark for other services. For the services that are not doing well, maybe by way of margin, delivery timelines, or quality, start with applying the components of the commercial research consideration. And be sure to introduce stage or phase-based KPIs that can help to regularly monitor SAP maturity across multiple clients. By following these action items, you too can take home the World Series trophy for your team and your organization. If you're interested in this presentation, feel free to visit the link that's presented here to download the slides for free. There's also a link to a blog article that I wrote that speaks a little bit more about how product managers can productize services. Thank you all for the presentation.
Yeah, very good, very good. Yeah, you showed a picture. Was it the Washington Nationals at the end there? They beat the Astros, and that's kind of our home team here in Austin last year. Houston Astros, and they lost last year to the.
Yeah, and they actually recently just lost to the Rays last year.
Well, yeah, I know, but
very interesting game though. But
yeah.
Hey, great session.
Yeah, go ahead. If anyone wants to unmute and ask questions, there was one in the chat I saw.
Yeah, I posted a couple there. Also, sorry that my video is a little bit dark. I've got the sun right behind me. I'll see if I can shift around.
That's quite all right.
Okay, one of the questions was, any tips on how do you balance customization / configuration versus repeatability? Think customization at scale, etc.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it part of it depends on the the current stage that the service is in. So maybe what you've done is you've identified some needs that a particular service can address, but in order to kind of really understand what it is that you can provide, even if you plan to make it more repeatable, there's going to need to be a level of customization. So there's going to be boots on the ground, people who roll up their sleeves, they're asking questions, they're writing them down, and everything manual that you would almost think about for a startup. And then one of the things that's really important is to continue to store that information on how you deliver the service, and really look at try to identify those patterns. Are there similar questions that's always being answered? Are there specific deliverables that always kind of follow the same format, right? And that's an idea as to areas of the service that you can ultimately productize. If the more customized the service is, then the more time it takes to deliver the service, right? And the more there could be mistakes. And when you're customizing a service, you really probably have a lot of folks behind the scenes. And so it really is that balance between taking the parts that are mundane or repeatable and kind of really optimizing those, and having the folks that deliver the service be really, really, targeted and specific with how they do the delivery.
But one of the examples you used was installation of ERPs, enterprise resource systems. And that's obviously been a big business the past couple decades. Have you seen providers in that industry moving towards a product approach?
We do. ERP is interesting because it's always customized, right? There's never a one set of configurations that apply, but the process to actually acquire what those specifics are, that part is definitely being productized. So, for example, the way in which they understand what a customer ultimately needs, but also in terms of taking some of those configurations and maybe turning them into productized options, right? So there's an ERP customer I'm thinking about where they basically have three options for a low-end implementation of an ERP service, and each of those options contains specific configurations that they focus on, rather than, the open the door approach, right, where they kind of go in and kind of, really, spend a lot of time and understand, what it is the organization wants. And, it's really, really packaged. And the more packaged you get, then what happens is you're able to spend more time on maybe some of those other high level customers or deeper customization. So it's and especially with managed services that those types of organizations provide are also in that vein where, once the delivery is done or once the setup is done, that consistent approach of how we're going to support the organization, that's also starting to get packaged or productized. And it's not to say that it's removing away from the customization element, but it's being more smarter in what they customize.
The other piece of it too, I think, with what you're talking about now, is that if your implementation manager is worth their salt, they're also going to be doing everything that they can to streamline the overall delivery process, to make sure that the ways in which they're interacting with their customers are really, cadenced the same way for each customer with minimal variation to suit the customer's needs, and that they have a really solid understanding and a highly documented understanding of what their process has to be, so that whole sequence of events is highly repeatable, highly measurable, and you can iterate on it in the same way that you were talking about earlier in the presentation, even though what they're doing isn't necessarily customizing software, it's that client interaction.
Yep. Absolutely.
Is it the risk though that the kind of things you're talking about, it seems like where does the product live? And it lives inside the heads of your employees. If your employees all quit, do you lose the product, so to speak? I mean,
yeah, that's right. The more, the more manual or customized it is, then it really does become, your people are the product. But even in productized services, the people are still the product, but the shift is, away from creating spreadsheets, right? Doing calculations, right? Things that, there are tools that can provide and helps to kind of extract some of that knowledge that's sitting in your resources heads, right? And make that a little bit more standard and visible. But then what it does is it really focuses those resources on, there's still an extension of the product, that's the quote unquote product that's being delivered. But what they bring to the table is more the, what their experiences is, right? Based on situations, as they stay closely connected with the client, they'll learn about their specific situations, and they'll be able to offer that specific advice that comes from their past, right? To really enhance that level of customer experience beyond just, a set of deliverables, ABC that are normally provided to clients. So it's part of it is about extraction and standardization. But then the other part is really, increasing the value of the service with what those resources bring to the table.
Yeah, and Dan, to your point, I feel like if you lose all your employees and you lose your product, you have a major problem with tribalism and process rather than anything else.
Okay.
That's nobody wrote anything down, so now we don't know how to run our business anymore, which I
know. Yeah. Did Haley, I mean, you had a question in Slack. Did you cover your questions, or did you have it?
Not quite, but Sam, maybe if you have some time to just jump into Slack and hit a couple of those after the session. I don't want to take up all the air in the room.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'll be around for some time, so I'll definitely go into Slack and answer some of the questions. Just trying to see if there's anything here that maybe.
Sam, I have a question. This is Hector.
Hi, Hector.
You mentioned I followed your process. What I wanted to ask you is, there are 4 characteristics that are challenging for when products or services, and we talk about this all the time when I talk about how to manage services as products. And it has to do with variability, the intangibility of your offering, also perishability, and the ability to separate the vendor from the service provider. And this is the challenge of most anybody today, has when they have a mobile app. Because if you look at what is the product for any mobile app like Uber, Lyft? It's a service, right? Same thing as banks today. Their service is to access for us to have access to our money. And ATMs is one of the early examples of how people, how you actually can maybe automate some of that to prevent variability, but you still have some issues, especially when your demand goes up all of a sudden, and then your capacity is doesn't keep up with the demand. Can you talk about how critical it is for processes to continue to be changed to ensure that as supply and demand change, that you can then automate the right things so that you can accommodate, you can allow substitutions in a way that does not require more people? How does that work? In your example of bench, I think it's a B2B type of service. And I think that most ERM, legacy ERM, are having that issue right now because everybody's shifting to something else that is cloud-based from the very beginning. And taking like a lift and load of that is not enough to get the legacy systems up to par with the newer ones that are born in the cloud, so to speak. What is that challenge of putting together the right processes, and how does it impact your business model as a B2B service provider?
Yeah, those are all really good points. And when we talk about streamlining, when we talk about just automating, right, things that are being done, even like if you look at IT organizations, they never try to automate something where they don't have the process laid out, right? So just to automate for the sake of automate it's going backwards, because you always end up updating the automation, right? And you may end up spending more time in doing that. So that's definitely not the way. When you look at this, what you're talking about, I think the key is to, we talked a little bit about data in some of our sessions at Product Camp, right? And the importance of data. And I think that really comes to bear, because there's this component of before you deliver the service, during the delivery of the service, after you deliver the service, there's this notion of measurement that hopefully all of you took away from the presentation. And that's going to be really, really important, because measurement will allow you, for example, to know whether, there are fixed questions and answers, for example, at the assessment phase that you always seem to ask every single customer, right? And if you start to see that pattern, that should be a light bulb that says, oh, wow, this could be something that I don't need to have my precious resources spend time in asking, right? I can send out a survey beforehand, have them answer those questions, and based on those answers, I can have a follow-up session. So that really starts to get to the heart of the resources and what their expertise brings to bear. As that supply and demand comes up, you're right. I mean, if every instance of the service is customized or manually delivered, as that demand starts to go up, it's going to be really, really hard to continue that momentum unless you add more bodies, right? And that could definitely be one way you do it. But if you really want, if you're paying for expert resources, right, they're not going to cost $20, $30 an hour. Right? They're going to cost upwards of 50, 75, 100, in some cases 100 plus. And you probably don't want them working on spreadsheets, right? But that's what they have to do in some cases. And so any way that you can identify what those small repeatable areas are, even if they're small, start small, right? They could be just aspects of it. And think about it in terms of the time that those resources bring to an instance of a service, right? And how much time are they spending on these manual tasks versus how much time they're spending on delivering the value of the service to the customer. And the other thing too to think about is that, before you start on this journey of what is my service, why is my service here, what are the benefits, right? Who are the audiences that I'm going after? All of those need to be defined. I mean, when you think about product and a software product, that's what product managers do. The good ones spend their time on really understanding what are the needs that they want to address, right? And who are the market segments and the target segments that they're going after. The service should be the same thing.
Yep. What is your feel for the need to have a business process team work alongside product management, because you expect that process is your secret sauce to maintain a competitive advantage in the marketplace when you have other competitors that jump in very quickly?
Yeah, it depends on the service, right? But if that is one of the hallmarks of what you bring to the table, then in that example, right, your business process engineering team is your quote unquote development team, right? Those are the ones that, spend their time and looking at the process, at least as has been executed, finding ways to make it better, finding based on the needs that they're seeing that customers are having, where there's a lot of roll up your sleeves, right, to address them on the spot. They may identify ways in which to uniquely provide an out of the box solution, even if it's a piece, right? Something that a resource can use in their bag of tricks, right? While they bring their expertise to bear. So if that's a critical focus on the benefits that you've identified for your service, then absolutely, it's important.
I think it's actually a gap in most technology companies that think that, they have, that most of their product is mostly services, and they're looking to automate everything. And, very few actually have business process professionals, people that are trained by professionals on how to actually implement, develop, design, and then execute or implement, going to implementation of processes when those processes need to continue to evolve in order to ensure that you're not throwing more people at the problem. You're making sure that you're automating the right things, and then you're actually changing your workflow, and you're doing configuration management on your workflows, which are always dynamic. When
Okay,
you're a service provider industry, that's what you need. And I find that in most cases, in B2B service providers, they have gaps because they don't have, their product managers don't have necessarily knowledge on business process development and design, and they don't have enough people in those teams assigned to figure out how to maintain a process that allows them to grow their user base without increasing more wages on the people they need to just continue to support those new customers.